I hope you're having a good day. Thank you for spending part of it with me. This is Gary Zacharias, and this is the Apologist bookshelf. I'm back for a third look at a book by Natasha Crain, and I love her work. She's so good at clarifying and explaining and defending the Christian perspective on life. She's a speaker, an author, a blogger, a podcaster. This is not her first book, by the way. She's got several books out, and they're all wonderful. This one is subtitled Regaining Biblical Clarity in a Secular Culture. And so I want to go to chapter 6. It's titled Re-examining Beliefs When Confronted with Doubt. And she starts off the chapter by talking about these deconversions that are going on. She mentions John Piper's son. John Piper, a really well-known theologian, but his son Abraham, he had like 1 million followers. He started posting material against evangelical Christianity. Well, he's not the only one. John Steingard, who's a singer and guitarist, he was in the Christian band Hawk Nelson. He said his faith has faded away, and there are other people. Marty Sampson, a songwriter for a Christian band, that's Hillsong, shared on Instagram he was losing his faith, but he feels at peace with the world. So this whole idea of deconstruction, as she points out, is pulling apart one's faith to kind of re-examine these long-held beliefs and saying, oh, I don't think so anymore. And it's more popularly used, I guess, in progressive Christian circles to say, I'm walking away from the historic Christian faith, and I don't think I'm going to go back. And so Crain is going to use the term deconversion to include both atheist kinds of deconversions and deconstruction type of what she's talking about here. It's in progressive Christian circles. She said, but we could be in this boat, right? We believe in the Bible. We have confidence, yes, but what if we start having doubts that the Bible is inspired and authoritative? What if you can't make sense out of some of the things that it teaches? What if you start wondering if everything that you've been taught and everything you've believed, everything you've heard from the pulpit, what if you believe that's false? And she said, there are a lot of ways to approach questions like these, obviously. And she says, if you make a big deal about it in public and have a deconversion narrative, it said you may be struggling with losing your faith for all the wrong reasons. So she talks toward the beginning of the chapter at the powerful social pressure that deconversion stories can place on believers, and then ways that we can process our doubts, which I think is really powerful, instead of just complaining, oh, these people, look what they're doing. But she's telling us how we can avoid having problems like that. She said there are some steps toward deconversion that happen. First is context. That's the person's background. And then the person has a crisis of faith. And then they try to seek to know the truth. They try to retain the faith, but they struggle. They move to agnosticism, meaning not sure, eventually become an atheist, and then they come out as an atheist. Now, not everybody, she points out, not everybody goes through all those stages, but that happens in a lot of the cases that people have studied. So she says these public deconversion accounts are often presented in a specific way to influence people, not just to inform people, but try to persuade others of the problems of Christianity. Do you see what we're talking about here? Testimonies. Instead of just saying, well, this is what happened to me, but they're turned and become an offensive weapon against Christians. As she says, today there's a whole cottage industry out there encouraging people to go public with their stories. And so I said, why did these public stories get so many people talking? And she said, well, really 3 things that are going on here that are common to these public accounts. So she's going to talk about these 3 ways that people get going to tell their stories. The catalyst, so that's kind of a crisis of faith. Number 2, questions that start coming out, just an avalanche of questions. And the number 3, the happy ending, right, coming out as an atheist. So she said, let's see why these are so influential. So here come those 3 again. Number 1, the catalyst. In other words, what got the ball rolling? And she said generally it falls into one of 3 categories that people have had that get them thinking about their Christian beliefs. One is intellectual doubts, the facts of Christianity. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Is the Bible full of contradictions? Things like that. Then there are emotional catalysts that happen. That's a more subjective response, and there are a lot of emotional issues that people have with it. And then third is moral indignation, that somehow their morality is superior to the morality that they see in the church or that they've read in the Bible. And they think especially of racism and sexism and colonialism and LGBTQ exclusion, the problem of evil, all these things. And so that's what she's talking about. It's that people that cite intellectual reasons, it's saying, well, look, the Christian faith is unreasonable. Well, what about those that have emotional reasons? The church has been hurtful, or Christians have been hurtful. And what about the moral indignation reasons? The historic church is guilty. It's been on the wrong side of social and historical issues. So she said, more often than not, when you hear these converts, they have little good to say about their time when they were Christians. And what they tend to make the reader believe or the listener believe is that they got liberated from an oppressive system. And so she said a lot of these deconverts come from a fundamentalist background and kind of an anti-intellectualism and kind of negative. And the vast majority had problems with Christianity while being a Christian. So it might be their lifestyle choice or a social issue or something like that. So in many cases, she's saying people are either deconstructing and deconverting from a legalistic form of Christianity, which may not be what the Bible was really teaching, or they felt like some kind of outsider in their church community. So she said, now the second part of these public deconversion narratives, so the first part was the catalyst, right, the spark, what got it going. And then came the questions that people came up with. She said an avalanche in some cases. Here's one, Marty Sampson, the man from Hillsong. Here's what he wrote. How many preachers fall? Many. No one talks about it. How many miracles happen? Not many. No one talks about it. Why is the Bible full of contradictions? No one talks about it. How can God be love yet send 4 billion people to a place all because they don't believe? No one talks about it. So do you see there are those questions? Either they're saying that nobody in the church welcomed them, or maybe they ignored their questions, or they didn't give a satisfactory answer. Okay, so the implication is what they're saying to the people that haven't heard yet the story. It's like, hey, there's a reason Christians don't want to talk about this stuff. And then when you do open those questions up, they don't have good answers. So it sounds like the Christianity has no answers for any of this stuff. And now the third thing, so there's a catalyst, there's a spark, and then the questions come, and then there's a happy ending. So it said usually the narrative ends with the joy of deconversion. They're so happy that they're away from Christianity. So Joshua Harris is another one. He said, I don't view this moment negatively. I feel very much alive and awake and surprisingly hopeful. And so we hear that quite a bit. So she said, that's what's going on. And she said, now, let's look at doubt from a biblical perspective. And this may shock some people, but I think this is really powerful. She says, doubt is normal and it's okay. So she said, a lot of people think of faith and doubt as opposites, but they aren't opposites. So what's faith? It's trust. She said, not blind or poorly placed faith, but skeptics always use faith like it's this leap in the dark kind of faith. Not true. She said, people exercise faith every day. You get in a car, you think it's going to get you to where you want to go. You eat something out of your refrigerator, like an apple. You have faith it's not going to hurt you. If you have surgery, you have faith a surgeon can fix you. But you don't have certainty in any of those things, do you? So there's always room for doubt, always. So what kind of faith does the Bible call us to have? Well, look in Hebrews 11:1, she says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So look at those key words there, assurance and conviction. So biblical hope is not based on a fantasy. It presupposes Christians will have good reason. They'll lead to assurance and lead to conviction. So many verses, she said, in the Bible speak about good reasoning. And she gives some examples. Matthew 22:37, 1 Corinthians 13:11, and 1 Corinthians 14:20, 1 Peter 3:15. So I won't spend time on that. But she said, that's not to say Christians will never have doubt. The doubt's normal. It certainly is. Look in Luke 7. John the Baptist has been preaching. And to live an amazing life, he must have been convicted of the truth of his beliefs, but he got imprisoned. he started to have doubts. John ended up sending two of his own disciples to ask Jesus, are you the one who's to come, or should we expect someone else? So there's John. I mean, the amazing, tough-minded John was going, I'm not sure. And then, of course, we got Thomas. We end up calling him Doubting Thomas. So she said, let's talk about ways that we can deal with doubts when they arise. So I think that's the most important part of this chapter. Number one, be honest with yourself about the nature of truth. See, truth doesn't depend on what we like or what our friends think or what doesn't cost us much. Truth is something you have to commit to regardless of anything else. So I think that's good. So we don't want to discover our own, quote, truth rather than the real truth that's out there. Number two, she says, remember that truth has nothing to fear, even if the Christians you know don't welcome or they can't answer your questions. So unfortunately, there are many Christians that haven't really looked at the evidences for their faith. They don't know how to respond to challenges. I remember J. Warner Wallace was talking about that. He's such a wonderful person, cold case detective. He said when he was an atheist, he would ask people that he knew were Christians on the police force, why do you believe this? Why do you believe that? And they didn't have good answers, and he thought Christianity must be pretty stupid. So it's so sad. So he said, we have to recognize that if we can't answer our questions, it just means the people we know may struggle with those questions. But good heavens, hundreds of years, people have been wrestling with these things. If you're going to search for answers, she says, be thorough. If Christianity is true, there's no need to fear it. So you can search the web. You can search friends. Hey, by the way, I've got a 4-page resource list with plenty of great Christian readings in areas like history and science and looking at cults and things like that. I'd be happy to send that to you. So if you want, just let me know, gary.zacharias@gmail.com, and I'll send you that list so you can do a little exploring on your own. Number 3, she said, again, we're talking about how to deal with doubts. Search your doubt to find out its root. So you may feel like there's just all these questions, but sometimes she says there's one doubt or one question at the core of all these others. So if you can identify that core question, maybe you'll narrow your spiritual searching. So she said, for example, a lot of people say, well, why would God allow evil? Why is God so hidden? Why doesn't God answer more prayers? But she said, at the root of all of these is what? Does God exist? So maybe study the evidence for God's existence and to go every one of these other questions. Number 4, she says, know the truth test for Christianity. So what's the truth test? One event. Paul mentions in 1 Corinthians 15, if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. So it's the resurrection. She said, people need to take a look that ultimately things like whether they've seen a miracle or whether the church responded the right way to some kind of cultural issue, that doesn't matter. That's not going to determine whether Christianity is true or not. It's the truth test for Christianity. Number 5, this is a really good one. Make sure the things you're doubting are the things the Bible actually teaches. So things like, God's going to send me to hell just because I don't believe in him. It's like, no, that's not the reason. I don't hate my LGBTQ friends, so I'm going to go to hell. No. She says, make sure you're going to struggle with things the Bible actually teaches, not mischaracterizations. How about slavery? Right, there's another example. The Bible teaches slavery, so I won't go for it. Well, that's a whole other topic, but it may not be the slavery you're thinking about. Number 6, some more ways to deal with doubt. Separate problems with the church or Christians from problems with Christianity. So if you hear claims like, well, I know a bunch of hypocrites. There's been sexism in the church. There's racism. Yeah, they are a problem in some churches with some Christians, but those bad experiences don't necessarily have anything to do with the truth of Christianity. Number 7, be willing to put in the work to resolve your questions. So if you have questions, do some work, do some reading. And like I said, I'll be glad to send you some material. Number 8, proactively expose yourself to faith challenges. Sometimes we get shaken when we hear a challenge, but we were unaware of what skeptics say. So expose yourself to what the claims of the skeptics have. Study apologetics. Find out what the attacks are on Christianity. Number 9, explicitly identify your alternative to Christianity. Oh, this is so good. She said, a lot of people who are struggling with their beliefs, they don't take the next mental step. Here it is. Well, if I decide Christianity is not true, what will I then believe? In other words, what's the replacement? And she says, every worldview has unanswered questions. So now it comes down to which worldview offers the best explanation of reality. And I would say over and over again, it's Christianity. There's no doubt about it. Number 10, here's our last idea of how to deal with doubts. Pray and read the Bible. Sure, ask God to illuminate His truth for us as we're reading the Scripture. So can I go through these 10 real fast one more time? Because I think these are ones that you might want to jot down and share with your friends. Number 1, be honest with yourself about the nature of truth. Number 2, remember the truth has nothing to fear, even if you have Christians that can't answer your questions. Number 3, search your doubt to find its root. Number 4, know the truth test of Christianity. Of course, that's resurrection. Number 5, make sure the things you're doubting are the things the Bible actually does teach, right, instead of a misconception. Number 6, separate problems with the church or Christians from the problems with Christianity. So are you just dealing with people that have hurt you? Are you dealing with things you've read about in the paper? Okay, but those are what Christians have done or the church has done. But what has Christianity said? And then number 7, be willing to put some work in, right? Resolve your questions. Go find those answers. Number 8, expose yourself to faith challenges. Find out what the skeptics are saying. What are the people who oppose Christianity really talking about? Oh, you can find them all over the internet. I've seen sites that have like 100 challenges to Christianity. Number 9, explicitly identify your alternative to Christianity. So you want to throw it away? All right. What replaces it? You're going to have some worldview. You're going to have some way to view what life is all about, what people are, what our problem is, how do we solve the problem. We have to have answers. And Christianity actually is going to offer us the best explanation of reality. But so the question is, if I think Christianity is not true, what do I believe then? What do I replace it with? Then number 10, pray and read the Bible. So, into the chapter, she says, if Christianity is true, the solution for doubt isn't to bury it in the fear of what you might find out. Go out. She says, be positive, investigate, ask some more questions. She says, stories of people who struggle with doubt and search for answers and find answers. Said they don't make the headlines the way these deconversions do, but these stories happen all the time. And here's one article and one person that she mentions, Ian Harbour. He wrote an article, Progressive Christianity, Even Shallower Than the Evangelical the Evangelical Faith I Left. So he wrote of how he deconstructed, right? He got out of the evangelical church. Good riddance, he says, only to realize where he headed was the progressive vision of the church. He said, that was like searching for the kingdom without a king. It was like seeking blessings without submitting to God's rule. It was progress without presence. It was justice without God's justification. So once he saw the inconsistencies, he decided to pursue a formal theological education. And then, through that deeper understanding of Christianity, he rebuilt his faith. And so here's the end of the chapter, and I like these words. This is after this man Harbour walked away from the faith, read more, and came back to it. He said, we need more theology, nuance, grace, compassion, and understanding in our churches, not less. But these things are made possible by orthodox doctrine, not in spite of it. Doubt and questions need not catalyze a pendulum swing from belief to unbelief. If worked out in healthy, thoughtful Christian community, and with an abiding connection to Christ, our true vine, they can actually deepen faith and strengthen roots, producing a life where we bear fruit and withstand the fierce winds of a secular age. So that's a really good thing to end on. Just a reminder, by the way, the book does really nice things. At the end of a chapter, she tells you other readings that you can go to on areas of deconversion, on doubt, on Bible difficulties, and then she has questions at the end. Let me just give you a sample of the kinds of questions at the end of the chapter. In other words, this book would be really good for doing a small group or something. So number 1, why do you think deconversion stories shake the faith of so many people? Number 2, what type of catalyst for deconversion do you think is the most common today? Is it intellectual, emotional, or moral indignation? By the way, my answer is moral indignation, but others may have a different answer. Number 3, What are some questions you struggle with regarding the truth of Christianity? Number 4, if a Christian friend of yours confided they were struggling to believe in Jesus, how would you talk to them about these doubts? So those are really powerful questions to consider. So again, the book is called Faithfully Different, Regaining Biblical Clarity in a Secular Culture. Natasha Crain, C-R-A-I-N, is the author. Any of her books are just wonderful. She has some books aimed at kids. This book is aimed, it's aimed at parents dealing with kids. But this one is good. It's aimed at adults, and all of us will find some useful material there. Thank you, and we'll do another podcast soon.